Hey, welcome back to my page. If it's your first time here, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully, you'll get something out of the topic that I wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about here today. Writing your first book. I've written quite a few books and had them published on Amazon. And recently, just got my first publishing contract for a book coming out later on this fall before the holidays. And often, when I go to book signings, I have people that'll come up to me and ask me about the process of writing their first book. They've wanted to write something, whether it's a family memoir, their own memoirs, or a fictional story, a children's book, something that's nonfiction, that's something about local history, just any kind of book. That people. There's so many things out there to write about, and every genre to write about. And I get a lot of people that'll come up to me and ask me about the process. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of writing a book, especially if you're a first timer. Uh, you know, um, I learned a lot from the very first book that I wrote. And I learned a lot not because of my willingness to listen to other people or join a local writers group and learn from other authors, but from making mistake after mistake after mistake. Quite literally, when I first started writing my first book in the year 2000, believe it or not, all that time ago. Um, it took me 18, 19 years to finally get that book right. And not that that was the only book I was working on for 19 years, but I wrote a lot in the interim. But I pulled some books off that I wrote back in the early 2000s. I pulled them off the web. Wasn't happy with them. I learned a lot of lessons from the process that I sort of self-taught um, during that time. So when people ask me about the process of writing their first book, yeah, I do have some suggestions and some pretty good advice, a bit of a roadmap. So if you're here to listen to, I guess, the process, get a pen, a piece of paper, take a few notes. It's nothing elaborate. Save this is one of your favorites in the videos. Make sure you hit subscribe to this page too, because I'm going to come back often and talk about the process of writing, some things that are helpful. There's so much to learn. I'm probably going to have some other writers on here and having good discussions about what they're working on and just the process and what writers can learn. Even writers who have been at this for 30, 40 years, they still are learning because with every book, there's something new to learn. And with every person you talk to and listen to their experience, there's something new to take away. So keep that in mind. That's why, I'll talk a little bit about this later, but that's why it's important to find a local authors group or an authors guild for your region and join it and get to know some of these folks. I've done the same and I've learned so much from other writers that I've taken a lot away so that it's actually made my writing better and made me more of a consistent writer with with a real strategy for when I go into a writing project. So that being said, you're like, hey, who's this Cyrus Alderwood guy? If you're the first time on the page, so I want to share my screen with you. Bear with me just a second. I'm gonna have to put my glasses on. I hate the glare on this, so bear with me just a second. And okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So here is my Amazon page for Cyrus Alderwood. And you can see that I have a few books out, right? So I've got two in the series of the Gonzo Chronicles, Tales from the Sunset Pub, Revelation Calling, Grave Legends, which is a really that was the book that took me 18 years to get correct. Dark Places, short story collection. A Man Called Douche. Yes, I really titled that book that. It's hilarious. Pot of Gold, another comedy. Um, Revelation Calling, great book. It's a political thriller, religious thriller. Bedtime Stories for the Terminally Afraid, another collection of short stories. So I've got, all in all, I've got 10 books on Amazon. So let me unshare my screen. And how do I do that? Well, okay. I'll figure it out here in just a second. So anyway, um, at dead time, dead time. Don't want to leave that. So I'm going to talk a little bit again about the process here of writing a book. So if you want to leave some comments in the section below, I'd really appreciate that too. So I'm going to ask you, have you what kind of storyline have you thought about? And in that sense, what what genre are you wanting to write in? So without giving too much, you obviously don't want to give too much out there, but in the oh, here we go. Stop sharing. There we go. Right at the top of my screen. Go figure. So, if you wanted to, leave some notes on the below about what kind of book you're thinking about writing, don't be too detailed. You don't want to give your story away. Um, but leave some comments about some of the issues you've had, some of the problems you've had with the writing process, kind of maybe some of the things that you're finding it to be challenging. But first thing I tell people to do if you're going to write a book, especially if we're talking about fiction, start with a really really strong idea. Begin with an idea that has to captivate you. This is a story that you kind of see in your head. It's kind of like a movie. uh, it could be a unique plot. um, Maybe it's just a scene, and it has a very compelling character, or maybe there's a theme that you want to write about that you feel really passionate about. So you want to find something that captivates you first of all. So that way you're going to stay interested in it over the long haul. Writing a novel, I used to think if I could write a novel, anybody could write one. But you know what? I've changed my mind on that over the years. Writing a novel is not easy. It's time consuming. It takes a lot of effort and concentration, and you have to be passionate with it. I know tons of people who say they're writers and they start writing a book, and 20 years later, they're still writing the same book. They've never gotten through it. They've lost interest in it. They went back and picked it up, or started something and just never finished it because maybe they weren't that passionate about it to begin with, and they were more in love with the idea of writing a book than actually the work you have to put in to do it. So start with a strong idea. That's number one. Number two, develop your characters before you start writing. One of the things that I'll do is if I have characters in mind, I'll write down the characters' names. So I have a running list of who they are. Um, but I want them to be interesting. So I start writing down personal traits that are going to make them interesting to readers and relatable to readers. A reader's not going to stick with a book if they don't find something that they relate to. If you're an avid reader, you know that with any book you've read. How many have you personally started and just didn't finish because it didn't keep your interest? Just so uh, Countless books like that for me. And not that people are bad writers, but you got to develop your characters if you want to keep people interested in what you've written. So understand your characters' motivations. What are their flaws and their strengths? What's the growth arc of that character? What kind of conflict are they going through? And then make sure there's a lot of tension in it, right? So you want to have characters that are very relatable, well-rounded, uh, and flaws and strengths. Write all that down about each of your characters. In fact, one of the things that I do, if especially if it's a longer novel or a series like Gonzo, I'll actually write out a bio of the characters, about a page each, right? Even if it's something I never use in a book, I write down a bio so I understand who that person is. Because if I understand that character, I can write that character better. And people will readers pick up on that. If it's not a character that you're invested in, the reader's going to know. Inevitably. And if you're an avid reader, you're a smart reader, you know this. Um, so make sure you develop your characters before you start writing. Okay, number three, the plot of your story. There are some people who just sit down and start writing by the seat of their pants. I know some people that can do that incredibly well. A friend of mine, Stephen James, is a best-selling author. He's a pantser. He sits down and just writes by the seat of his pants, and he gets from A to Z, and he writes compelling stuff, great stuff. I, however, cannot do that. I have to have lines on the road to stay in between, so I have to plot, I have to outline my plot, my story. So even if you prefer to write organically, which I do for the most part, but I do an outline, and then just I leave enough room for the story to grow, the characters to grow. So having a basic outline just helps keep you on track with the story. I know many people that have started, and that's one of the reasons they quit in their first book, because they got off track, don't know how to get back on. It's too much of a pain in the butt to go back to the very beginning and start all over, or go back and find where they screwed up and fix it. Um, so outlining is a good idea to help. So what I'll do, I'll write down intro, and then I'll write down this what I want the intro to look like. 2 or 3 paragraphs. That's all. Chapter one, I write down what happens in chapter one, and I only leave it at about a page. And I'll write these out on a notepad. And then chapter two, and then chapter three, until I've told my story, no matter how many chapters it takes. I've had some that go into the 30s. Some I'm done in Gonzo, I break them up into 5 segments. Keeps me on track. Um, Identify key plot points when you're outlining, the twists in there, the resolution, so you have that roadmap to follow. Make sure you put those in there. Or if you have a part in a book after you've gone over the arc, you want to add some tension or something like that, you don't know what scene you want to write to do that, just make sure you note it. Think of, like, just put a little asterisk. Think of a scene here that puts my main character in mortal danger, and so it looks like he or she is not going to survive, or something like that. But make sure you point those out in your outline. Number four, and this is pretty important. This is where a lot of people screw up. Writing a novel takes a long time. Okay, it depends on how fast you write. But writing a novel, it's a long-term project. So it's important that you build a really a consistent routine. So set aside time every day or week. Stick to a schedule. Sometimes I would wake up in the morning, and some of the first things I do after I'm brushing my teeth, I come in here and I'll beat on the keyboard for a half hour, especially if I'm toward the end of a story or a book and it's keeping me awake. I'm that excited. I'm that invested in the story. I'll make sure that when I first get up, I'm actually writing, and then I'll try to take maybe an hour later that day or that evening, and continue on. So, because I work for a living too, right? So you have to work around your schedule. I know a lot of people that write have kids, families, things get busy. Totally understand that. But if you're going to be a writer, be a writer. Have that routine. Have that time set aside. I know a lady. She'll get up an hour earlier than she used to when she's in a writing project before her kids get ready for school, and then her day gets started. She will literally get up an hour earlier and start writing, and then she will got the kids with a routine. They're younger. They go to as soon as she puts them to bed. First 30 minutes after that is in front of her computer writing. So she sticks with that outline. She sticks with that routine. It works for her, so she finds some time during the day, and 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there. It all adds up, but she makes it a point that it's important to her to write every single day. And her work is great. So she has some books out there too. I'll actually have her on sometime. Um, don't get stuck on your first draft. That's number 5. I know people who expect when they start writing, they want it to be perfect. They'll notice all kinds of flaws, misspellings. They'll go back. They'll start chapter 1, chapter 2, and it's like, let me go back and edit this. And guess what? By the time they're on chapter 5, 6 months later, they're going back and editing 4. Stop that. Don't get into that. Don't get into that rut. Don't get stuck on the first draft. The point of the first draft is just focus on getting your ideas down on paper. You can always go back later and revise and polish it, but getting that first draft done is a huge step. Don't let your mind and your need for perfection get you bogged up so that you don't finish your book, or you burn out trying to finish your book. That happens to 90% of first time writers that don't finish their books. That's what's happened. They didn't set a routine. They got stuck on the first draft because of that mentality and never finished. So that's a huge thing. Don't get stuck on the first draft. The job is to get the first draft done as quickly as possible and then go back, make changes, revise, polish. You can always edit later. All right. My first drafts are they're a mess. So I have a lot of work in front of me after a first draft because that's when the real work starts. After you write your book, you're so happy, you're excited. You go have that celebratory cigar, or I do, and then the real work starts. Like go back and make changes and edit and look at all the misspelled words. Oh my God, there's tons of them. So that's important. Get the first draft done. Number 6. This is very important too. This is something that I screwed up with a lot on my first book, which is why it took so long to correct. Show, don't tell. Rather than telling the reader what's happening, show it through actions. Write compelling scenes. Don't say, "Hey, my character was stressed." Show it. The guy's shaking and he's smoking a cigarette. He's flicking the lighter and can't get it lit because he's nervous. Like things that show that they're nervous. Shifty eyes, um, breaking out into a cold sweat. Describe it. Show, don't tell. Show it through actions, dialogue, sensory details. That creates an experience for the reader. That keeps them engaged. Just saying that so and so is nervous or so and so is afraid. Who cares? Who cares? Show them, don't tell them. Uh, I've screwed up that rule more than probably any other. And then I have to go back and in the second draft and show, don't tell. Number 7. As you grow and learn as a writer, this is one of the things that becomes more and more important. And I mentioned the guy Stephen James earlier. He's a great author, but he also does a lot of writing workshops. And one of the concepts he talks a lot, so much about, that is vital in every single story, whether it's a book you're reading or something you're watching on TV or something tonight you're going to find on Netflix. Create conflict and tension. Conflict drives the narrative. It makes sure that your characters face these crazy challenges, these obstacles that looks like they can't get over, and then maybe they do, and then just when it all hope looks lost, they solve something, and oh my God, it gets worse, right? So, it it ensures your characters faces obstacles and challenges, both internally and externally, not just in the physical world, but getting over your personal fears, your anxieties. If somebody has some sort of trauma that they've experienced and they have to face that demon, imagine the emotional track they're going on too. Tell those, show them, show the conflict and the tension outside and inside. Number 8. All right, this is kind of important to do too. This is why the outline is so important. Stay organized. And I still struggle with this to this day after 20 some years of writing. Keep track of your characters, your timelines, and your settings. You can use certain software like what is that one? Scrivener, I guess. Um, or even things like spreadsheets, right? You can use those to keep yourself organized, especially for longer works. Now, the book that I just finished, I was co-writing with Robert Prather, and you can find him on Amazon also. Um, and you talk about a long, long work. I'll talk a little bit more about that book on another post down the road, but this was a 500-page plus monster. Okay. Um, Excellent story. So I'm looking forward to it coming out. But I take meticulous notes. So I'm not going to sit and beat on a keyboard for a spreadsheet. I'm already writing enough in Microsoft Word. So the thing is, keep track of your characters, your timelines, and your settings. This was a particular book that jumped in time. Modern day, dark ages, modern day, dark ages. So it's important to keep your story straight, right? It's tough. It's a lot harder than it seems. So stay organized. That's a rule number 8. Number 9, this I cannot preach this one enough. Be patient and persistent. It can take time to write a novel. Be patient with yourself. It's your first novel. Don't get angry with yourself. When you get frustrated, just take a deep breath, get away from the keyboard for a few minutes, come back. You can't write angry. If you're not in the mindset of your characters, you're not going to do that character or that story justice. So don't give up during slow or difficult times. Breaks are fine, but perseverance is the key to finishing your book. Make sure you have that routine. You go back to it. If you need to catch a break, take it. You know, wonder how many times Hemingway or F. Scott Fitzgerald took breaks. Well, we know Hemingway wrote in a bar. He probably took a lot of breaks. And here's the 10th rule: seek feedback. Ask others to read your work and give an honest opinion. And I'm not talking about family, because you can go to your brother, sister, mother, father. Hey, read this. Yeah, it's great. That's what you're going to get. This is kind of an interesting story, but the first time I finished the Nightwalker, the very first book I finished, that crappy one, it took me all those years, I sent it to an ex-girlfriend and asked her to read it. Oh yeah, she didn't like me very much. And now years later, we sort of became friends again. But yeah, that was interesting feedback. And then one of my dearest friends, she read my book and was like, "Hey, that's a great story. First of all, who did your book cover? Because it sucks." I'm like, "That was me." And she's like, "Who's your editor? Because you have all kinds of you need to clean this up badly. Great story, but God, this is poorly written." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm the editor." She gave me a lot of feedback because she's one of those. She is by hands down the most avid reader I've ever talked to in my life. Seek feedback from trusted readers or writing groups. If you have a writing guild you're a member of, ask a handful of them to just read a sample or something. That's one thing the guild that I'm in, we do. People will submit samples of something they're working on. We'll read it, and maybe anonymous. We don't know who wrote it, so we give honest feedback. Outside perspectives will help you spot weaknesses and provide insights on how to improve your story. So I hope those help. But yeah, definitely find an organization that you can be a part of, because that's going to be probably one of the most important things that's going to help your development and growth as a writer. So leave comments down below. Let me know what you're working on. How's that process coming along? And what kind of hangups have you experienced so far? How can you get over it? Things like writer's block, things like that. So one other thing I want to mention real quick is I've been part of this thing called the Writing Prompt Challenge. And I'd started this with, just challenging a few people, a few fellow writers and some non-writers back in April or May of 2023. And I thought we would probably keep up with it, doing one writing prompt a week until we got burned out, maybe a handful of weeks later. No, it is September 6th, 2024, still going strong. Doing this every week. In fact, I phoned these into the radio station at Super Talk Radio in Tri-Cities on the Saturday morning show. Christy Slaughter reads those out. People do the writing prompts and they send them into the radio station to send to me. A friend of mine who's a school teacher in Georgia is using this in her classrooms. So if you want to be a part of the writing prompt challenge, you're like, "Hey, what's a writing prompt?" Well, a writing prompt is a good way to help you practice writing, especially if you're going to be working on your first book. Essentially, what I do is I pull 3 cards from this deck, and it'll give me 2 plot cards and a character card. Like the character might be a rodeo clown. The one of them that I wrote was called Rodeo Clown, Box of Kittens, and something else. Right. So thinking, how am I going to mesh all these 3, things together into a short story? And I don't mean you have to write 10, 20, 30 pages. No, a writing prompt is where you just take maybe 30 minutes, you write out something or type something on your computer, and just a couple pages really is all we're doing. This week's writing prompt is the 3 cards are: the first one is apparitions, the second one is homesick, and the third one is zombie. So after I finish this video and upload it, I'm going to be working on a writing prompt that every Saturday we share with each other. Might be 2 pages, might be 3. Sometimes some folks really get into the story, and I might get a 10 pager, 12 pager. Hey, that's awesome. Whatever, if you feel so inspired to do that. Now I post some of mine up, and I don't edit them. I put them up on the internet on Substack. It's cyrusalderwood.substack.com. You'll see samples of those writing prompts on there, and so if you're kind of curious as to what they look like. But it's a good way to get your brain working, just to be creative, think of new scenes. The first time, if you've never done a writing prompt and you start doing them, you're probably gonna have some very bland, dull scenes at first. But the more you write, that's the point, is to practice. The more you write, the more you get your mind thinking. You want to do something outside of the box that's gonna be more creative. So that's the goal, just to get your brain thinking, putting ideas together to form a story. I find them incredibly fun. So yeah, I thought this thing would burn out in about 4 or 5 weeks. No, I've gotten probably 60 plus writing prompts that probably a good couple dozen can be, if I punched them up a little bit, can be short stories. I can do a couple of short story books already out of these. So make sure you check that out on Substack, cyrusalderwood.substack.com. And you can subscribe to that for free. So when I write one and post it up, you get an email reminder that it's there, or you can actually read it in your inbox. So, but hopefully this has helped. And follow me on Instagram also. I post the cards up so people can see what the writing prompts are every week on my Instagram. It's private, so you have to ask to follow me. So hopefully you will. Hopefully you'll follow these pages, and yeah, leave comments below. Hopefully it's been helpful. Good luck with your first book.